9 podcasts.
Welcome everyone to The Trade-Off, your daily podcast giving you the latest insights into this year's AFL trade period. And we've got to thank Tyre Power because they are having the Tyre Power Great Race Sale. Buy 3 and get 1 free on selected Curnow passenger car and SUV tyres. I'm Jimmy Bartel, and every time I'll be joined by the Essendon legend himself, Matthew Lloyd. How are you, Lloydy?
Great, Jimmy. Yeah, it's an exciting time of year. I know it's frustrating for some people as well when deals are stretched out, but it's how you win premierships. I know it's not the be-all end. Draft's important, but this is a critical 9 days for all clubs to improve their list.
Yeah, it's a good mix and balance of trade, free agency, and then, of course, building through the draft. Just quickly before we get into some of the deals that we're aware of, I find this period the most comical period. It's very hard to take seriously. We've got people who tend to like to sit in the background, now have microphones put in front of them with the lines trolleyed out. He's a required player. He hasn't requested a trade. And if someone comes and asks about our star player, well, maybe we entertain it, but he's staying here. It's quite a funny time.
Who have you liked over the years? Like Geelong's man?
Andrew Mackie.
Yeah, and who was before him? Sorry.
Stephen Wells.
Stephen Wells. I think Wellesley was pretty good.
He was pretty good. Wellesley was always big. We'll just try and get the deal done. I find it funny. There's 3 or 4 lines that get trolleyed out each time. Do you think they actually think if they said something differently, their supporter base would throw their arms up?
I think everyone talks a strong game, but by Tuesday next week, everyone starts to get a bit jumpy to get these deals done.
Some of the free agency deals that everyone is well and truly aware of, but we'll just recap them for you. Tom De Koning will join the Saints. Of course, that was the worst kept secret all year on that mega offer. Jack Silvani, we thought was heading to maybe Collingwood or the Dogs. Well, he's going to the Saints as well. James Warple down to Geelong, so he's returning back home. A local lad down the highway there. Draper will join the line. Sam Draper there, the ruckman. Of course, he'll be injured for the first part of the year. And Brody Mychek to Melbourne as an unrestricted free agent. I want to ask you, Lloydy, just out of those 5 names, the immediate impact. Of course, Sam Draper will be coming back from an injury. Warple, midfield soldier. Will it be Silvani, De Koning or Mychek with his experience in the Melbourne forward line?
I think of all those, only one moves the needle where you can jump maybe 4 spots on the ladder or something like that, and that's De Koning. So I know he didn't have the best year, but he might have struggled to handle the pressure. But at the start of the year, I thought, this is a guy I think he could. I know Max Gorn went over the top and said he could be the best ruck in the go. I can't remember exactly what he said, but I think De Koning could really improve St Kilda. But the rest of them, Silvani's a role player, Warple's a role player, Mychek I think now is a role player as good as he's been, and Draper still hasn't done a heap at AFL level despite the way he's spoken about coming back from injury.
With the extra player on the bench, Rowan Marshall, as soon as the De Koning offer was being floated early stages of the year, people were like, we got 2 athletic ruckmen, both want to be the number 1 banana. The Saints have talked a strong game as we expect, but then there's word out today that Rowan Marshall would like to head to Geelong. The Saints will stay, will keep him. The 2 rucks with the extra number on the bench, if they do keep them both, will it work?
Everyone out of St Kilda likes to say that Marshall's a forward and can play well as a forward. I've seen moments, but I certainly think he's a ruckman, not a forward. So I understand why he wants to leave St Kilda. And there's always going to be, when you bring all these players in on big money, there's going to be some like potentially Wilkie and some like Rowan Marshall say, hang on, we've been great players for this club. So I can understand Wilkie and Marshall feeling that way.
Well, we'll talk about another side that's going to bring in some big names, the Gold Coast Suns, which we'll have a few looking elsewhere shortly. But the day one trade rate, Jacob Weir, the outside winger there for the GWS Giants, has selected Port Adelaide. No compensation because he'd be an unrestricted free agent there. Charlie Spargo from the D's to North Melbourne. Of course, his dad's spending a fair bit of time at North Melbourne. Pick 41 will land at the D's. Port Adelaide, I like this from Jason Cripps when he had the microphone in front of him and declared that any trade for Zach Butters is off the table, not turning heads, not nothing. He is staying there at the Port Adelaide pair. Good news for your Bombers, Lloydy. Braden Fiorini has selected the Bombers as a place where he'd like to play his football. And a couple of players I think would be nice adds to the Swans, not shifting the needle, as you mentioned, a lot, but I think what they can do for the Swans will be very helpful. Malcolm Rosas Jr. is headed to the Swans, dynamic small forward. And Jai Sarong, who's just been caught in the queue there at the Hawks in some posts down back, has nominated the Swans as his new homes. Time to move to our first segment, the talking point. Look, Lloydy, Essendon have declared they won't entertain a Zach Merritt trade. Is this big talk? Because a lot of people think, well, if you don't entertain the trade, you've got the problem, Essendon, as in, all the issues going on in the background. There's been different things leaked to the media. But since the change of president or chairperson Andrew Welsh, they've been a lot stronger in their language around Zach Merritt staying.
Yeah, Jimmy, there's no doubt that they're more than comfortable having him play for the club. That's what they'd prefer still after everything that's gone on. I think they've done a pretty good job since Andrew Welsh was named president to mend bridges or at least improve the relationship and have some proper chats and listen to him and talk to him and things like that. But that's not to suggest. I think they're going to be listening, and it's for Hawthorn now. It's on Hawthorn to come back with something that's going to satisfy Essendon, to get them even to think about it or get them in a room to talk about it. So I think they've done a pretty good job, the Bombers, of what could be a pretty poor position where they go, we've got a player that they know wants to leave. What position are we in? They've pretty much put it back on the Hawthorn to say, hey, unless you're serious, don't even bother. Well, they're actually saying don't even present us with anything as of today. Matty Rose has said we're not even going to take their call. So that's it'll take till Wednesday night for anything to happen, if it happens at all.
If they had their time again, would they have just pumped the brakes a little bit? Because obviously a couple of players come out and did some pretty strong interviews. Mason Redmond's interview with Cal Toomey was a fascinating read. That those could have been articles done if there was a deal done in a couple of weeks, because it then painted a picture of he can't come back, Zach Merritt.
I've never seen anything like it. In my time in the game, I've never seen teammates, the players are hard to get to do anything. So for them to say, pick up the call, I'll speak about Zach Merritt, that really surprised me. I think they got that strategy wrong to speak out about him. I know he hasn't handled himself perfectly, but he wasn't happy in what went on with his teammates. But I was at the Best and Fairest the other night, and everything was pretty good considering what's going on. I saw him sitting with many different players at tables. I still feel, Jimmy, he gets to Hawthorn. That's my gut feel, that by next week. But then you start thinking about what's fair, what could get them to go, okay, we'll consider that. Looked at it, pick 8 is a starting point, obviously.
I think most people are comfortable that pick 8 is the starting point. Yeah. So if you're Hawthorn, are you trying to just offer picks? And if you're Essendon, do you want players and that pick? I think everyone thinks that pick 8 is going to be part of the package no matter what. But what else is attached to it? Yeah,
it's a great question, because the Bombers already have pick 4 and 5. So then suddenly you've got pick 8. I'm not wanting another pick. And it's a big year for Brad Scott next year as well. So he needs some players who can perform well next year, because 4, 5 and 8, they'll contribute well because they're high picks. But you see, it's hard for first-year players to impact. So that's where the Cam McKenzie, Josh Ward types do excite me with the red and black hat on to get through the door, if you could entice one of them to come, particularly McKenzie, who fell out of favour at Hawthorn.
Would you be asking for one of their big talls? Because that was often the debate, the Hawks. Are they too tall on the forward line? And, of course, Jack Gunston having one of the most extraordinary years, well, his best year in football, that they often had Gunston. Of course, he doesn't have much longer to go, but Big Chollywood, Chol, Mitchell Lewis, Kel Shadir. You imagine Kel Shadir, they wouldn't trade him, and then it pretty much leaves Chol or Mitchell Lewis. Would you be asking for one of those two to help beef up the forward line of the Bombers?
Yeah, I don't think the Bombers can go into next year with, say, Caddy and Wright. I just don't think it's strong enough. So, Peter Wright won the goal kicking with 28 goals. And Caddy he's going to blossom from here. So, I think Mitch Lewis, Peter Wright and Caddy would excite me a lot more than what they've currently got.
So, Hawthorn, to turn it, it's the new term that we're using now in football, to turn Essendon's mind around quickly, pick 8, someone like either a Ward or a McKenzie, and maybe a Tall?
Yes, that would be a fantastic result. I think guys that can play for you for the next 10 to 15 years, particularly in the midfielder, and pick 8, plus Lewis, who's at least got 6-7 years, and should only be better. We saw him get a taste of it in the final series. I think it's a pretty good situation out of a bad one right now.
Well, as you mentioned off the top, it is an exciting time of the year, and people are being list managers at home, and I don't think we'll ever see this grouping of names being thrown up in the 1 year. So, Lloydy, I'm going to ask you yes or no. It's pretty simple to these players, and one by one we'll go through them. I'll join in as well. Zach Merritt, do you think he stays or goes?
I think he goes. You,
yeah.
Jimmy?
Yeah, I still think it is. Like I said, I think the initial period of players who are a little bit disappointed and upset, and the Essendon faithful, I know they've tried to mend some bridges and admire what Andrew Welsh has come in and done. They sound stronger, more unified with him sort of leading the charge. I think that gives him a better position to negotiate from, but I still think he gets out.
But I will say there's pressure on Hawthorn, and when I see news of them being interested in a Bailey Humphrey, for example, I would be nervous if I'm Merritt and his management going, hey, we've been all in here. Don't tell me make sure you fight this right out to get us, because you can't do this to us, and then we have to go walk back in there. So, yeah, they've got to do the right thing by Zach Merritt.
Yeah, we agree with that. Zach Butters
Stays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the advantage Port Adelaide's got is they'll have cap space next year to match any deal anyway.
Yeah.
So they've got a year to work on him under the new coach and new people coming into that footy club. So back yourself in there, Port Adelaide. Charlie Curnow is a fascinating one because Carlton seemed pretty strong on him staying. Charlie would like to explore to play elsewhere. Geelong and Sydney are the two front runners. Of course, Gold Coast have got some other to actually entertain. Curnow?
I think he stays. Looking at the two clubs interested in him, Sydney and potentially Geelong, I just don't see how they do it. I liken it to the Jeremy Cameron deal where you'd want three first round picks pretty much, and I just don't see how anyone gets that done.
Yeah, I don't think Geelong's got the capital. Maybe Swans with talent, but the whole point is you want Curnow to come play with that talent. Christian Petrarca, I think when he first notified everyone he would explore his options, and Melbourne were comfortable for him to do that. The Crows were first to put their hand up, which was a bit of a change from Christian because it was big Melbourne clubs only, and then it turned into two interstate clubs. We thought the Crows being a big club themselves, but then Gold Coast Suns have won him over, and he wants to go play for the Gold Coast Suns. That deal gets done?
Yeah, it gets done, and Melbourne have talked strong today, as teams do, saying, hey, we're not paying any of his salary. So I don't know whether the Suns, with the way they've got so many young players and talented players, how they can afford to pay Christian at his age with so many years left over $1 million. So that's going to be a really tough negotiation.
It was interesting word coming out from the Adelaide Crows that Christian Petrarca said, I'd be interested if you added another year at the same amount of money, which would be an extraordinary amount to be paid at age 35, I think. So you can only ask, I guess, and he got back knocked back on that. You mentioned paying part of the wage. I think that one of the reasons why Melbourne won't pay part of Christian Petrarca's is the fact is they realise they'll have to pay a considerable amount of Clayton Oliver's. He told Mitch Cleary to get nicked at the airport, and he was only going on a holiday. But while he was on his way to the holiday, he just called past Sydney Harbour, and he was on a beautiful, lovely boat. I noticed the name of it, called the Blue Goose, out there floating around Sydney Harbour. And just guess who happened to be on the boat? A Giants contingent. So it makes sense for the Giants with Josh Kelly tipped to miss a number of games early in the season. Of course, Steve Coniglio had his injury concerns, which leaves a lot of pressure on Tom Green.
Callum Ward as well.
Callum Ward retiring, which leaves a lot of pressure on Finn Callaghan and Tom Green. Does Oliver make sense for the Giants?
He does, and I think Justin Lepich came out today and said he's the type of player that fits what we need to. So that's a list boss of Collingwood. So Tom Mitchell will go, and Scotty Pendlebury's into his final year, you'd think, and Sidebottom into his final year. So.
But does Oliver create that argument where it was Mitchell or Long?
Yeah.
Does that create the argument Oliver or Long?
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not sure he's exactly what they need because I love when they spiced it up with Josh Dacos and Nick Dacos and the speed of it. But whether they're looking at it and thinking, can we get him cheap here? Can we get him where we're paying $400,000 to have Clayton Oliver on our list? And even if he's not the Oliver that he used to be, Collingwood don't have a lot to play with here, with money and probably picks. So they may just think of, can we get someone who could be, I don't know, come top 10 in the Brownlow medal and be a good player for us.
Yeah, we'd love to see Clayton Oliver back to his absolute best. Hadley Doodley, Sam Flanders, a lot of clubs were interested in him. He got pushed out of the centre bounces, playing out half forward and on the wing. And, of course, if you're bringing in Christian Petrarca, it's going to limit his opportunities as well. You've got to remember too, the Gold Coast Suns have got a stack of academy kids from last year and this year and the previous year that they can all flush through at a cheaper option and just as talented. He said he would like to go to the Saints. Pick 7. Would that facilitate the deal, the Saints pick 7?
He's one that, again, my time covering the game, he doesn't jump out at me. Yeah, that I'd be giving pick 7. It may be what they have to do, and a lot of clubs are queuing up. But, like Fiorini, Flanders, they're guys that I know win the footy. But I look forward to seeing him on the stage in Melbourne. I know people hate hearing that because it's a national game. But the pressure on performance really rises because you see him from week to week, obviously in the Melbourne media. So, I don't know, Jimmy. I wouldn't be giving pick 7 up for him, but they may have had to and because they're offering him a lot of money as well. They
are offering him a lot of money. And I just look at that forward line that can then come through the midfield at different stages. Flanders, Max Hall was a breakout player. You throw in Higgins as a forward and then flying Liam Ryan, that they're going to get in the doors. They got some experience and depth in those sort of half-forward, flanker, small forward roles. Bailey Humphrey is a fascinating one for me, Lloydy. The Suns, he's not going anywhere. Not sure what you're talking about. He's going to be a Suns player. His manager, he hasn't spoken to any clubs. And then all of a sudden they've realised, you're in Melbourne and people know who Bailey Humphrey is. That the fact that he's been seen speed dating with quite a number of clubs. He remains a Gold Coast Suns player?
Well, I would expect so because he's one that I do really rate highly. He's
a match winner.
He's a match winner, and some of the things that he did late in the season, he doesn't have more than 10 to 12 possessions, but they're high-quality disposals. So when you talk Flanders and Fiorini and all that, I'm give or take on those guys, but Humphrey is somebody who I'd love to have at your club like the Gold Coast, but they may have to feel that one has to go. But I'd be keeping him over getting Petrarca through the door. That's how much I rate Bailey Humphrey.
No, I'm with you on this one. And we touched on Rowan Marshall before. The Cats, obviously, their first pick is a lot later than most, so there might be some future picks involved in that. I can't imagine a player going back to the Saints.
No, but he's there for 2 more years. So, again, the Cats will have to offer something significant, I think, to get him.
Time for some tough calls. Thanks to Grunt. No matter what you do it with Grunt. There's nothing tougher. Available exclusive at Bunnings. Heading into day 2 of the trade period, what needs to make a tough call? I'm going to kick it off, Lloydy, just so we know how to play this game. We touched on it with the Essendon Hawthorn situation going on with Zach Merritt. I think there's also a scenario where Hawthorn needs to make the tough call, that there is a point where they threaten to walk away from Merritt. I thought you made a great point a bit earlier going, you can't put him out on the ledge and then leave him there. But if Essendon's going to ask the world, there is a point where you have to, it's a bluffing game, as we know, where you say, look, you know what, you can't have the world for him. We'll turn our attention elsewhere, and then you deal with your problem. That's if I'm Hawthorn.
Yeah, it's an interesting one whether the Bombers at this stage, okay, then, because we really do want to keep him. So what they would do in that situation, or whether at all, I'm sure the Bombers have gone through scenarios. Okay, what would we take here? And whether they get excited over something. But if they're not excited over a particular, I'm sure Hawthorn have said, hey, okay, these are names we'd put up. If there's not something they really like, I think the Bombers will happily take him back and be willing to shake hands and say it didn't work out. My one is Jack Steele, I know, loves the Saints, very loyal to St Kilda, just stood down as captain. But I think he has to say to himself, okay, where's that club out there that I can find? Otherwise, I think he will unfortunately finish his career in the VFL at St Kilda. So I just think he has to make the tough call. I'm sure he's doing that already, but I think that with Windhager re-signing, Wanganeen Millera and all the ins that have coming to St Kilda, I think they've probably gone past him.
If he was to play for another club, and I'd love him to stay at the Saints, but if he was to go elsewhere, it'd have a nice full circle moment if he went back to the Giants. And as we said, the Giants need some depth through that midfield. Join us tomorrow for a full wrap of day 2 of the 2025 trade period. For Tyre Power's great race sale, buy 3 and get 1 free on selected Kumho passenger car and SUV tyres. See you tomorrow, Lloydy.
See you, Jimmy.